Oh my gosh, we're live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our channel. I know we haven't been on that often, but we're going to change that. But welcome to Canadian Small Business Women. And I am so excited for what we're going to do today. But before we introduce our guest, I would like to remind you that you should hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please share this video because we want to make sure we have everyone be a part of this conversation. And the easiest way to do that is to try to help boost that algorithm and hit that like button. My eye's running. I'm not crying, I promise. It'll be a sad start. My eye just tears up quite a bit. But welcome. Say hi in the chat so that we can see that you're here. And I'm going to have the ladies say hello before we say what we're going to talk about. So let's start with Brooke.
Hello, so happy to be here, Dwayne. So excited to be able to have this conversation with you, my friend.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Well, good morning to the two of you and everyone watching or joining. I'm really always so very happy to talk about such an important topic as midlife and menopause.
All right. And for those of you who are new here, I'm Dwayne Peel, and I'm the founder of Canadian Small Business Women. And I self-proclaim I love to talk, but also what I love to do is talk about important things. And we had the honor of hosting a panel last month at the National Menopause Show where we talked about menopause being more than just hot flashes. And we were able to share our stories and really talk about some of the things that people aren't talking about, which is menopause that is really medically onset, where we talk about immediate side effects, exaggerated side effects. And there were a lot of people nodding in the audience, and we realized that, you know what? We really do need to talk about this. This is one segment. Menopause already is not really talked about that much, but this is another segment of it that we need to tap into. So let us dive right in. I'm going to look up a lot because I have quite a bit of screens around me. So I apologize, but it's one of those things. It's okay. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine here. We're all family, right? Because we're going to talk about some pretty, I would like to say, we're going to talk about some, it's not going to be too heavy. It's not going to be too heavy. So, all right. If you didn't catch
not heavy, just honest.
Honest. There we go. Honest. And while we're being honest, does anyone in the chat know what clinical menopause is? I'm going to wait. Do you know what clinical menopause is? Hi, Judine. I see you're in the chat. Good morning. If you know what clinical menopause is, say yes or no in the chat. Because a lot of us really don't know. And while you're going through it, let's talk about what they are. So we have three different options here. So you have the natural option where I think most people go through, where it's the gradual process of going through, your hormones changing over time as you age, right? Then you have the induced process where your ovaries just stop functioning. Beatrice, jump in anytime you want because, you are the resident expert. And then there's a surgical option, which Brooke and I can really attest to because I can attest to the surgical option. Brooke, you can attest to the induced option, correct? So I'll let you talk about your experience with the induced option.
Oh, happy to jump in. So again, my name is Brooke Gordon. I am a speaker, a coach. And one of the things that came about for me is, a year and a half ago now, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I went from noticing a change in my breast to talking to my doctor about it, and really fortunate. She said, you know what, we're going to take this seriously. I want you to go for a biopsy. We're going to do that at the hospital. So she says, it's going to be a longer wait than a normal ultrasound because I want this biopsy option available to you. Well, skip forward Just another 2 weeks after that, and the next thing you know, I'm in chemotherapy. And we didn't really have a good discussion. I just knew my period might stop, he would have always said, and I didn't think anything of it, to be honest, because when I first thought about, your period stopping, many of us know performance athletes have their periods stop. People going through extreme stress and trauma, sometimes their periods would stop. And so I thought that's what it was, the stress of going through this and the physical stress of going through it. It is very hard on the body to go through the type of chemotherapy that I experienced. So I didn't think anything of my period stopping. In fact, it was great. It was just one less thing to worry about. And for me, I know we're going to talk later about sort of that start of periods. So I'll put a pin in that and I'll come back to that one and how they connect. But it wasn't until after all of that was done and my doctor had said, okay, well, we need to start you on hormone therapy now. It's the next part of your treatment plan. And I said, okay, what does that entail? And she said, well, when was your last period? And I said, oh, it was 11 months ago. And she said, oh, okay, well, here's the thing. I need to give you a shot to shut your ovaries down before I can give you the medication. But I don't really want to give you more drugs than I have to. So here's what we're going to do. Our next meeting's in 3 weeks. Let's have this conversation then. And then you'll be close enough to medical menopause. And then we'll get you started. And I was like, what? What are we talking about here? What? You use the menopause word and me in the same sentence. Like, what's going on? And she said, well, yeah, you haven't had a period in almost 12 months. And so once you hit the 12 months, you will be in medical menopause. That's the medical definition. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I was still thinking this is related to my periods. This is related to the trauma. It's a pretty awful experience. I'd gone through something called radiation therapy. It's also very hard on the body. So I still didn't think anything of it. And then just a few weeks ago, I had my last meeting. We finished all of the treatment. She's really excited. And I said, okay, I've heard that I should be talking to you about osteoporosis. And she said, oh, right. Remind me when your last period was. And I said, it was July of last year. And she went, oh, yeah, you're in menopause. Sorry about that. So that was sort of my introduction. And I know we're going to get deeper into the symptoms, but a lot of the symptoms that I experienced were masked by how serious my treatment was. And so I didn't recognize them for what they were. And Dwayne, we can talk about that again later, definitely the hot flashes. And then when I started the hormone therapy, myself and many other women in different groups that I belong to had the same experience where the first few weeks weren't any different. And then suddenly, bam, and now I am one of those ladies with a fan.
Yeah. Yes. It's essential. The fans are essential. But like, talking about your experience and the fact that, you're not putting two and two together with everything you're going through. And then, there's also menopause. Like, what is that? Why is this a part of the process? It can be confusing because I can say going through induced and surgical, I felt the same way. I didn't know what I was in for because I had to go through hormone therapy after being diagnosed with breast cancer. And, I had to go through hormone therapy during COVID. Not fun. And then I had to have a surgery to remove my fallopian tubes and my ovaries. And that's when things hit instantly. And I started having that conversation. I know I'm probably going to ask this question because you already had you spoke about the moment where you realized it was menopause. For me, the moment was when, like right after my surgery, about 3 weeks later, I had a meeting with my oncologist. And he's been pretty cool. Everything's fine. He usually explains everything quite well. And sat in his office and I held on to a tire that was around my body that wasn't there 3 weeks ago. And I literally, I mean, in hindsight, I felt bad for the poor man, but also I am always like this. So he knew what he was in for. I held that fat and I said, what is this? And he's like, oh yeah, that happens. I'm like, no, but what is it? Why? Like, what's going on? And then he started saying menopause. And I'm like, excuse me, sir? And no one prepared me for this. I don't know what to do. Like, what do you do? Right. And he had no answers for me. He really didn't. So that's where, having these open conversations, because, growing up, if your parents would always talk to you about puberty, but they're not talking to you about menopause because they haven't been through it, and then their mothers didn't talk to them about it. So it's one of those things where we have to start talking about it now, right? So while we're sipping our coffee and you're talking about what you're watching on TV, we should probably start talking about how we're feeling and all the things we're going through in life as women, because we can relate, right?
Yeah. Dwayne, I want to just quickly, because I want to hear from Beatrice, but there's two things you said that I think are so valuable. And just the past few weeks, my tires started and I was like, oh, this is new. And one of the things that my doctor had said, I said, okay, help me. How do I reduce my risk of recurrence? Like, what happens now? Because I'm done. And she said, yeah, the most important things there's two things: keep your alcohol consumption low and try to keep your weight down, because we see a higher risk of recurrence in women who have higher weight. And I said, oh, okay. And then she looked at me and said, oh, right, you're in menopause. That will be challenging for you. And those were our parting words. You talk about now, to your point earlier, she's excellent. I love my oncologist. She normally has excellent conversations with me, but I'm also younger than most of her patients. And so a lot of the women who've gone through breast cancer have already gone through menopause. And so it wasn't a conversation that they needed to have with your oncologist. It's like, oh, I've been there, done that. And so being a younger person, it wasn't in their script. And I think that's important. And the second thing I wanted to raise, because I just remembered this now, my mom went through surgical menopause. And so she couldn't tell me what to expect because she herself got thrown into it. And that's a conversation I realized I need to have with her.
Yes. I know we want to pull Beatrice in. Beatrice, I know you heard us talk about our experiences. Tell us, based on some of the things that you're hearing us say, is this commonly heard by you? Do you have any insights for us?
So first I want to thank you for sharing your lived experience. I am not, I have not experienced cancer, and that the fact that you're sharing your stories is very powerful. Hearing your experience and how you're describing things is very humbling, I would say. And I want to give everyone here on the live and anyone who's going to listen, I'm Beatrice Siege. I'm a host of a show called This Time of the Month. We talk about midlife, which includes menopause, with experts. And sometimes it can be a style expert, but also gynecologists and scientists. I want to be very clear. I'm not a physician. I do not give medical advice. And in fact, the only person who can give you medical advice is the provider who knows you and your history. But that being said, I want to clarify or ask you a few little questions, because sometimes we use words and they can be confusing. So, Brooke, you mentioned, actually, I think you both mentioned that upon your diagnosis, you were given hormone therapy. Mm-hmm. I want to be clear for the audience, because hormone therapy, there's lots of types of hormone therapies. So there's the ones that are used to treat cancer. And I think that's what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, so I'm on what's called an anti-estrogen.
Correct.
So literally all the estrogen in my body gets collected and released. So I got none. And it wasn't like a nice, slow perimenopause. It was bam. Yeah.
That's why we call it induced in a clinical or scientific setting, because you're given a treatment that can be chemotherapy, in this case, probably a SERM. That's the acronym for it, but it doesn't matter. The point is, because of the type of cancer you had, they wanted to shut down the response to estrogen. So that in and of itself, that's what's rushing you into a menopause. They're treating your cancer. That's what you want to do, obviously, because that's the most important thing. The consequence of that is that you become menopausal overnight, because the definition of menopause is that decline in estrogen and progesterone, and your ovaries stop functioning. You're in a situation where it was forced upon you. It can be forced upon you surgically. We can remove your ovaries that are producing that estrogen. So that's I just want everyone to kind of understand that, because you may hear the term hormone therapy as well in the context of treating some of the menopausal symptoms, and not everyone's eligible for that. Specifically, breast cancer or estrogen responsive cancer survivors may not be a candidate for that. So I just wanted to put that out there, because there's a lot of words that get used that can have multiple meanings. But it's really hard when it happens. It's hard for anyone. First of all, surviving cancer is, I can only imagine, your energy and your focus is on survival, right? But then there's all these things that happen around it, like the menopause symptoms, the not fun redistribution of your weight, the not fun hot flashes, and brain fog. And so a lot of survivorship, is based on, okay, but you're alive. We're happy that your cancer is sort of, under control or in remission. But what about the thrive part? And I think that's where your stories really come to life. Like, how are you dealing with that? What's it been like for you, or anyone who's listening who might share experiences like yours?
Yeah, that is true. And it's really good. Thank you for bringing up the clarification, because even post what people look at as the big three in cancer treatment, surgery, chemo, radiation, there's still hormone therapy after the fact, right? So it is good to be able to distinguish between those options. You brought up, oh gosh, brain fog moment. Well, maybe that's what it is. You did bring it up. You brought up, symptoms. And I remember on the Revive and Thrive stage at the National Menopause Show, one of the speakers said that there were over 103 known symptoms of menopause.
Yeah.
That is wild.
I don't know if that's the number, but the point is there are many, many beyond the basics ones we hear more commonly. Hot flashes and night sweats, which are called vasomotor symptoms, brain fog, mood changes, mood swings. But, silly things, they're not silly, they're real, but itching of the skin, in weird places everywhere, including, but everywhere, dryness, joint pains. You hear of things like frozen shoulder, like, just your articulations, your joints, they start to hurt. My gosh, there's so many, and we don't necessarily realize. We just kind of, I'm feeling this way, and you don't necessarily connect the dot that it might be related to perimenopause or menopause.
The frozen shoulder is quite interesting, because I never really heard of that. I have some stats to drop for everyone. I feel like I'm a statistician all of a sudden, but no, I'm not. So they say up to 80% of women experience menopausal symptoms at some point. Up to 80%. Now, only 25% of women with menopause symptoms seek medical treatment due to its severity. I'm interested to know, especially, well, just from our point of view, why that percentage is so low. 25% of women with menopause symptoms seek medical attention due to severity. Is it that we don't feel like this is something we can go to our doctors about? Do we feel like it's a normal part of life, so we don't need to speak to anyone about it? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I have some thoughts on that if I can share. I had just started to experience a bit of perimenopause symptoms. And so for me, Beatrice, it was the itching, and it was on the inside of my knees. So a little bit of a dry patch and itchy. And that was the very first symptom, and that lasted quite a while. And then my periods got really, really, really heavy. And they were heavy to begin with. For me, it was, I had a heavy flow for 10 days and I had actually been on different hormone therapy to try and help me regulate that because of fainting and low iron and all of these things. And so when we got to the point where my period stopped, it truly was a relief for me. My iron levels back up. Like, there's been such a blessing that way. But to Dwayne, your point, why wouldn't we go? When I first started experiencing the menopause symptoms, because the chemotherapy had been damaging my ovaries, and that was the first induced cause. And in that case, I used to get hot flashes, but I didn't know I was in menopause. So I didn't think they were hot flashes. I recognized them instead as my nervous system being overloaded. In the same way, when you run, you start to sweat because, your nervous system, so everything's getting hot. And so for me, it was, okay, this is too much. And I would stop what I was doing. I would take a rest. I would breathe. If needed, I would go and have a nap, and they always stopped. So I had made a very different mental model, not that, this is a dysregulation of my body's ability to maintain my internal temperature, but that something was causing stress for me, and this was the response, is the stress response. So that part was really interesting. And then the other reason why is, and I think some of them, you can go and talk to your doctor. So I had gone to talk about vaginal dryness. And she had said, oh, yeah, there's a tablet it's suppository that you can use. And I tried it, and it was uncomfortable, and it was messy, and it was a bit painful. And so I was like, okay, well, that didn't work. And in fact, it was because of our relationship. I was like, Dorina, did you ever deal with this? And you were like, oh, yeah, I got a recommendation from my oncologist. Give this a try. And that brought some relief. And it wasn't until later, when I was crazy comfortable talking about all my symptoms, because I've been asked week after week, everything from how are your bowel movements right through to, can I examine your breast, that I felt really comfortable to talk about anything. And I actually ended up talking to my pharmacist, and he got so excited. Beatrice, you would love him. He was like, oh, I just took a course, and I'm so excited. You're the first person I get to talk to about this, because no one wants to talk to me. And he told me how to use the suppository more properly. And he said, you're probably just pushing it in too far, because what is my practice? Tampons, where you give them a good push in. And so he's like, nope, don't go that deep. It'll be less painful. And he was right. And it was much better. So, it's also, where's this level of comfort? I didn't have this level of comfort. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to go for a pap smear. It's one thing to talk to my doctor about some things. I can talk to her about anything, but sometimes her advice back is not, it wasn't, she didn't dismiss it, but I didn't know to probe deeper. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go home and try that. And it wasn't until I learned the skill of advocacy that I was able to start asking better questions, pushing for an answer, saying, okay, but that didn't work. What about this? What else have you got in your toolkit? And so that was a skill that I didn't have.
May I?
Yes, please.
So, why the percentage of people who experience bothersome symptoms, whatever they may be, is high, and the percentage who seek help for it is low. The mismatch is probably several reasons for it. Lack of awareness. We're not connecting dots because we have not received the education. You're right. We focus a lot in school about sex health education is all about how your body works, and mostly how not to get pregnant or not to get someone pregnant. And then when you're a young adult is, the fertility conversations for those who want to have children is how to have children. But after that, it kind of doesn't continue, right? And so even someone like myself who was, I'm trained in the sciences and the health sciences, I have a PhD. I'm sorry, I clearly have a dog here. The word perimenopause.
The dog is agreeing with you.
Yeah, she's agreeing. She's angry. The word perimenopause was not in my vocabulary. I think a lot of us don't realize that perimenopause can be a period of up to 10 years prior to the menopause, which is defined as 12 consecutive months without your period. I am so sorry. So lack of awareness, we don't know all the symptoms. We're also very focused on taking care of other people, so we dismiss ourselves. And then sometimes we do bring it up in a clinical encounter and we are dismissed. So like there's so many reasons. And I just urge everyone to keep a symptom diary. That's, you know, I think with all my conversations with the experts around me, something as simple as just a notepad, don't make it complicated, track symptoms, see if there's a pattern, like I get itchy, or, you know, this is happening to me. Oh, and my period is chaotic. Because this can happen in your mid to late 30s. You know, lots of myths. We think of perimenopause or menopause as like this far away thing, but it can happen, you know, earlier on. So there are a lot of reasons, but track them. And if they bother you, that's when you have to have that self-advocacy of like going to your care provider and saying, I've been noticing these things. What are my options, and might they be related to perimenopause, and what can I do, you know, to help? And it's not always a medication. There's lots of lifestyle or modifiable behaviors that we can do to help our symptoms. Yeah.
That is true. Thank you. And advocacy is definitely the word. I wanted to highlight, Judine said sometimes we're not aware it's perimenopause, like you said. She had dry skin and just thought it was her lack of water intake. So it could be something where, yes, you're thinking it's the resolve is water, but it can actually be a symptom of something else. But being our own advocate is definitely something we all need to lean into more. And especially when we look at if it's a woman problem. So a lot of times it's not something that is high on the list of things to be solved. But then when you also look at the disparity when it comes to women of color, that's even a lower percentage of people who would either have access or would, you know, in the back of our head, sometimes this is a small thing. We're superwoman, we're supposed to carry on. But I, personally speaking, I don't want to have to be a superwoman. I'm forced to be because sometimes I feel I have no choice. But if I see that I have a choice, I'm taking it because I'd like to live the easy life as well, right? And I want to try to find a solution to whatever my problems are. I also am not very shy. I grew up in a family where, you know, my parents and, you know, culturally speaking, we don't want to air our dirty laundry, but menopause shouldn't be considered dirty laundry. And what we're going through medically should not be considered dirty laundry. It is a part of life. So a lot of times I will say things and, you know, I'll see my mother look at me like, is she really saying that? Like in public? And she can't believe it. But, you know, after a while, she kind of is used to it. Like, you know what? You're right. You should talk about it. But initially it's shut up, shut up, shut up. Don't say anything. You should not say that. But I am a believer. I am going to say everything. I'm going to be as honest as I can with my experiences to as many people as I can so that I can help as many people. And I will always ask. My doctor knows I will ask. And my first oncologist, I remember him saying, I had a list on my phone. I would always have a notepad that's for the doctor. And every time there's something that comes up as I go through day to day, I open my notepad and I put it in because, you know, when it's like you get there and you forget everything you want to talk about, right? So I would open it. And I remember saying to him, I feel like I'm sitting in your office and I'm complaining, and I don't like complainers or complaining. And he said to me, if you can't complain in this office, where can you complain? He said, this is the space to lay it all out. And so I took that personally and I laid everything out every time. And I now know I need to go into these offices and complain, because if that's the way that they will listen to me and they will look at my symptoms and really try their best to manage what I'm asking them to manage, then maybe we'll get a resolve. So we all need to be our own advocates, but we also, if we cannot be our own advocates, bring a friend who is not afraid to say all the things that need to be said. Bring a friend.
Dwayne, may I?
Yes.
Two things you said that I think are so important. One of them, the second pair of ears, because when we're emotional and we're talking about something that's really upsetting, like for me, I had a lot of pain, vaginal pain, and this was something that was really emotional. And so to be able to have that conversation, I also wanted my partner to be able to be part of that conversation, because we were both needed to be part of the solution. And so but that was a whole new level of comfort to be able to have that. And so the second pair of ears, someone else to hear, because we could come away from doctor's appointments and I would remember something and he would remember something, but we both didn't remember what the other had remembered. And so, it gave us a more complete picture. But I also want to say how lovely it is that your oncologist was modeling and teaching you what advocacy looks like in practice, because that I think is part of it. Is you came in saying, I don't want to complain to you, and they're saying, tell me all your symptoms, because these are puzzle pieces and I'm trying to understand if this is actually part of something else that's going on, maybe with your treatment, maybe with this. So being able to help you understand. I had a nurse who did the same for me, and she would say, Brooke, this is where you have choice. What do you want? And I was like, well, what's the right thing to do? So just that ability to have people in our lives and recognize those moments. So I was really glad to hear your oncologist was modeling for you what advocacy can look like in practice.
I thank him a lot for that. Believe me, I thank him for a lot of things. I do have a new oncologist. She's awesome too. But this was the first one that I'm discussing. But before we jump into myth busting, I want to remind you all, please, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. And if if there's something that you can relate to, comment and like the video, subscribe to the channel so that more people can join this conversation. All right, now let's talk about some myth busting. We're going to, is hot flashes the only symptom that people really talk about? We already busted that myth. So if you have been watching, hot flashes is not the only symptom. Now, are the symptoms the same for everyone? I see someone in the chat said they had faint spells. Faint spells. That's a symptom I've never heard of either. So there we go. We just touched on this, Brooke. When you're going through menopause, does it mean that a woman is no longer sexual?
No, but it can mean things need to be a little different. It can mean that you need some extra support that you might not have known was possible. And it's so interesting because you are going to get a wide range. Dwayne, you gave me a fabulous recommendation. My doctor gave me a different recommendation. My case nurse, so the nurse who was following my case with my oncologist, was actually also a gynecology nurse. And she gave me completely different advice. She's like, yeah, you can try those. She recommended coconut oil. And I had another girlfriend who swore by olive oil. So there's all kinds of, different options, things that work for everybody. And I think there needs to be some experimentation with that as well. And I know he would probably, similar to your mom being shocked, my spouse would crawl under the table and die if he knew I was talking about this. But one of the things that was a real challenge is when I was initially in chemotherapy, that was not on the table, I'll say. But one of the things, the government of Ontario, which is the province that I live in, put out a fabulous pamphlet of all the things, ways to be intimate while you're in chemotherapy. And we experimented with some of their recommendations, and that was actually opened up a whole new pathway for us. And when I was done with chemotherapy, this was part of the shock. I was, excited. I certainly didn't feel that I was not sexual, and excited to get back to that part of my life. And that's when I experienced horrible pain, and it literally emotionally broke me. We haven't really talked a lot about the emotional part, but here I was thinking, okay, I'm healing, I'm better, I finally have some energy, and the joy, this place of joy in my life had literally been removed from me, and I was devastated by that. And so that took months of me also realizing that this was also part of, we call it smooth muscles. So this is part of the digestive system, part of your reproductive system. That tissue can be, not for everyone, but for some people, it can be damaged by chemotherapy. So there was a combination happening for me. Again, it's hard to put all the pieces together. I was going through menopause symptoms because the ovaries had been shut down by the chemotherapy. And at the same time, I had literal tissue damage that needed healing and repair. And these two things, so that took another 6 months before that finally got to a point where things were resolved enough. And so, yeah, I would say it is definitely, it means a woman is no longer sexual. Hell's no. But it does mean things may not be the way they have always been. It might need some more experimentation and patience and conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, we are sexual beings and we have a right to pleasure. It might look different, and that's the key word, is to explore different ways of being intimate, to actually not be afraid to talk about it to your circle of care. And whether it's, cancer survivorship or menopause, or both. I mean, experiencing decreases in desire or libido combined with more painful experiences, whether it's due to dryness, tissue changes. I want everyone to know that there are so many options, and that is definitely not talked about enough. Pelvic floor therapists are part of an allied health professional circle of care that most people don't know about. I didn't even know about it. So there's a lot you can do through pelvic floor therapy. And we don't have time to go deep. I just want people to kind of take note, like, okay, I can ask about pelvic floor therapy. There are different types of lubricants for in the moment, friction. and there's lots of different types and pros and cons and things to be aware of. Then there's actual medications. So, perhaps you were offered something like DHEA. Those are the inserts, or vaginal estrogen. There are so many options. That's what I want everyone to remember. But none of those are going to help with the emotional, mental one. That's like, communication, therapy, being kind to yourself. So it's a very big topic and it is not discussed enough. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the next question actually I was going to ask you to touch on is, the myth busting about two things. Hormone therapy is dangerous for all women and weight gain is unavoidable. Oh, you're on mute, actually.
Apologies. I'm so paranoid that my dog's going to bark. It's been really hard because the weight gain let's take the weight gain issue. I mean, as changes in body composition, that's what's really happening, right? Like you're gaining weight, but it's also kind of shifting. But this is why we talk about the middle weight gain. And it's definitely a pain point for so many women in our community. We've, all experienced it, or many of us to varying degrees. It's frustrating because you feel you're doing the same things, and yet this is happening to you. So is it inevitable? I mean, I think changes in our body, they do happen through aging and menopause. But is the result out completely non-manageable? No, the answer is, of course it's manageable. There are things you can do, and they're not the sexy, flashy overnight things. So beware when you're seeing your social media feed filled with 3 hacks to burn your belly fat or belly fat burning challenges. Like, that type of language for me is very upsetting as a woman. but also as an evidence-based, human. It's really moving your body. It's the stuff, it's the basic things. Moving your body, lifting weights, lifting heavy, and heavy can mean something different for me than for you, but lifting a heavier load will help. Of course, nutrition, reducing your alcohol, focusing on sleep. It's really kind of boring, but they do help manage those things. So that's what I'll say on the weight issue. Of course, there's a new class of drugs that you probably are seeing it's been all over. I feel like it's in the news every day. When you're in a situation of experiencing, the disease of obesity, there are a class of drugs that can help with that. But I've seen some scary social media around taking low doses of it for cosmetic purposes or to help you with the menopause belly fat. So again, talk to your doctors about this versus getting your information on social media. And the other one is about hormone therapy. What was the question? I forgot. I forgot.
It's about hormone therapy is dangerous for all women.
All right. I think hormone therapy is like either the cure to everything. Again, I'm focusing a lot on probably the feeds that you're all getting in your social algorithms. So it's either the panacea, like the fountain of youth, the fixer of all things, or it is the evil, cancer-causing, fear-mongering. And the truth is, those are very extreme views. Hormone therapy, and when I say hormone therapy, I'm referring to using estradiol, which is what your ovaries produce, and it's not replacing it. It's hormone therapy, so low doses of estradiol. And if you have a uterus, you need to protect the lining of your uterus with progesterone. So if we're talking about that, it is indicated for hot flashes and night sweats. They're called vasomotor symptoms. If you have identified, family of history of osteoporosis, you might have osteopenia, so you're on you're kind of, there's a risk factor for you. It may help. There are other things to do there too, but those are the things that menopause societies around the world say it's what it's indicated for and may help you. If you're not eligible for it, don't have fear of missing out. Your bones won't break. You're not gonna, die early, and some of the scary messaging that you're seeing out there. There are non-hormonal treatments that can help you with night sweats if you're not eligible or don't want to take it. I mean, along with all the other things we've talked about, like exercise and moving your body, there's this new class of non-hormonal drugs that help with hot flashes that, say, a cancer survivor can be eligible for. So long story short, it isn't evil, but neither is it this fountain of youth that you may be seeing messages about online.
That's really good to know about the hormone component too, because especially for Brooke and myself, people don't want to touch us with a 10-foot pole, right? Because of our cancer diagnosis. Now, there are plenty of options. It's a matter of finding what will work and what your oncologist will approve of. Because everything has to go through that. But, that was discouraging for me, I must say. It was quite discouraging at first.
Sorry, and I think that's a shared story across cancer survivorship, right? The options are more limited. Or, I took notes earlier. When you were telling your stories, it sounds like you weren't given a proper in-depth heads up of what it would feel like to be induced into menopause. And that is a recurring story I hear a lot in our community. And so that's something that as citizens, we should demand better. We should lobby to say, hey, when a patient gets a diagnosis, like, what's the process and how are they prepared for what that means if they're going to be induced into menopause? And then secondly, well, what are my options? And there are. Now, we're in Canada, and if anyone here is listening in the US, drugs tend to be approved first in the US and then in Canada. But like, say, the non-hormonal drugs, those are newer. So it's been a great, exciting time for cancer survivors who are not eligible for hormone therapy to treat their vasomotor symptoms. And they're called neurokinin inhibitors. So you might have heard the word fezolinetant, and I may be mispronouncing it, but those are options for vasomotor symptoms. There's also antidepressants at different doses than you would use them clinically to treat depression. Those have been around for a while. I'm going to give, because I know we're running out of time, but if you're in Canada, or like Menopause Society of Canada or Menopause Society, those are two fantastic websites to go to for patients, and obviously health providers. But also the Canadian Medical Association Journal has a great article, and I think it's publicly accessible, on the pragmatic approach to the management of menopause. And you'll see some of these treatment options listed, and I think we're going to give references after. But the take-home message is you probably do have to fight. I don't like that word. Advocate. Let's use the word advocate. You have the right to care. You have the right to feel better. You deserve it. And there are options, so don't leave without knowing what those options are for you. And you might have to try a few things, and that's okay. It's a process. Don't get discouraged.
That is quite true. And in the spirit of not being discouraged, we also have to take a step back and be self-aware, because yes, our emotions will fluctuate minute by minute sometimes, especially for me. And your reaction or your decision making, you need to sometimes pull yourself back or pull the emotions out of it to make the decision. Now, with going through menopause and how it affects our emotional state and our mental state, we want to still be able to make clear decisions. Now, I don't know if, Brooke, if you've been experiencing this as well, because I know that I can the flip of a switch. I really do try to be mindful of how I say things, when I say things, how I make decisions, because I know that emotionally I might not be in a good space at that particular moment. And when it comes time for me to advocate for myself, I might get frustrated a little bit easier. So I try to temper my breathing and temper my words, because I don't want the receiver to think that I'm, making these demands because I'm just upset. It's because I truly feel I need them. Is there any way any tips that you might have for us to be able to work around some of the emotional components of going through menopause?
Duania, I love what you said, and I also, because I've done a lot of coaching work and consulting, that is a skill set that I had developed, but it kind of goes to the side when your health when you're not feeling well and you don't know why. And I think, Beatrice, you also said something really important earlier. You talked about pelvic floor therapy, and that was something that I tapped into as well. And so not one specialist or one doctor might know all the answers. It's a lot to keep up with. And so if your doctor, sometimes they might dismiss, there are absolutely experiences where people get dismissed. Sometimes they just don't know. And so you also may find yourself, repeating yourself, or having to go exploring and finding your own answer. And we talk about sort of this emotion piece, this frustration, depression. It can weigh on you because you have to be your own project manager. You have to be your own advocate. You can have a wonderful relationship with your doctor, as we've been describing here, and still not get the answers that you need. And so I think that can be really challenging. Duania, you talked into leaning into breath as part of that. Note taking is also a huge part of it. Writing down what those symptoms were, the questions you have, and then writing down what the options are, taking a bit of time to research. And there's now great tools out there on the internet to help you with research. But I think also when you're making decisions, and some of them are big decisions, some of them are emotional decisions, and not feeling like you need to be rushed. And I think that's also something, Beatrice, you talked about, we have a right to care. And oftentimes we'll get those options. And because of timing, they're like, okay, what is your decision? Because they need to take the action, because this is when your meeting is. And it can be challenging. So also finding out and asking, When do I need to make this decision? I need a bit of time to process this. How do I let you know what my decision is? And that's a really important question that I learned. How do I let you know what I've decided? Because I'm not making that decision. You've just given me all the information. I can't make a decision right now. I want to understand it, and I need to sit with it for a little bit. And so that can also help.
Definitely. Go ahead, Beatrice.
I'm sorry. I would say that, having, I have 2 children, they're teenagers now, and a partner. And I think communicating, just letting people know how you're feeling and connecting the dots for them, because if they just see, the people in your life, they might just see the outward expression of your mood, right? Like you're angry, you're sad, you're scared, you're hot flashing, you're whatever the thing may be. And I've learned to there's no taboo, just like everything else. Like I've spent so much time since my children were little. I had all the age appropriate books to explain how their bodies were working, right? And I progressed with them. So I was like, well, now I'm continuing their education so that we support each other. So I'm like, hey, now you're teenagers, your hormones are doing this. Well, I'm menopausal and my hormones are doing that. And sometimes this is why I'm doing the things or saying the things I'm saying. And it just creates awareness, and that's therapeutic. I think if there's awareness and understanding, and it's not going to cure my hot flash, and I'm still going to cry for no reason sometimes. But now we know there's a word. It's not mom's crazy, because that's a terrible stigma, right? And it's not my partner's, like, I'm not even going to use the 5-letter word that starts with B. But it's like, oh, this is happening, oh, why am I distancing myself from you? Because I'm afraid that if I'm intimate, it'll lead to physical intimacy and it hurts. All of a sudden you're diffusing, like there's a whole conversation going on in your partner's head that, like, maybe she's not into me anymore. But no, that wasn't it. It's because I'm experiencing all these changes, and like, we need to change things up. This is how I'm feeling. All of a sudden it just opens up that opportunity, right? To be, and then your partner's like, she does love me. oh, so communication is it's the hardest thing to do sometimes, but so critical. And I'll quote a pharmacist who's a menopause certified practitioner who came on my show, and I love her, Teresa Isabel Diaz. She said those conversations, sometimes you have to have them in a non-threatening manner. So when you're walking together and you're not eye-to-eye contact, or driving in the car, with my teenagers, it's like, just have those little bits, not in a heated moment, just like converse and say how you're feeling. That was long-winded, but I think communication is so critical, and we're afraid to say the thing.
Yeah. I think we need to be more afraid of not saying it, or more afraid of the repercussions of not saying it, because just like how we need to communicate these things to our families, we need to communicate it with our colleagues or with our friends, because these are the people who are going to be in our circle, and they might notice things that are happening to us, but they don't really know what it is, but they're saying something is different about such and such. I wonder what that is. But if you have conversations, just like you would sit with your girlfriends and talk about a TV show, have these types of conversations, it will make it easier. I can tell you, yesterday, actually, my boss looked at me in passing. No, not yesterday, Thursday, in passing. And he's like, you really, are you okay? Because you've been looking kind of sad for the past week or so, or past few weeks. And I stopped, and I'm like, yeah, I've been going through it, but you know what? I'm actually okay today. And I just kept it moving, because I appreciated the fact that he's been noticing. Sometimes, and normally we have a great relationship, I will tell him, I will walk into his office and be like, look, this week might not be the week. Just let me be. Thank you. You just be like, okay, I got it. But like, have the conversations with the people around you who are going to have to interact with you, and be as honest as you feel comfortable being. But you can take those baby steps, those bite-sized chunks, just one conversation at a time, whatever you feel comfortable with, because at the end of the day, they might see you looking down and they might have a way to pick you back up. And that's what you want. You want to lean on everyone around you, because hey, if you're the people like us three women who are speaking to you here, a lot of people are leaning on us. And there are times when we need people to lean on. And in order for that to happen, you have to be vocal. You have to be vocal. Now, I know we've been talking for a while, but I want to remind everyone, in the description, we will have a download for you that's going to have some references, some resources for, finding information to help you with going through all this. If you have questions based on the conversation that we just had, please drop them in the comments, because we can come back and answer them. We can do a part 3, we can do a part whatever number you'd like. If you want to share with others anything that you've experienced and you found some way to work around, or you have someone who's helped you, please also leave that in the comments, because we want to try to find a way to help each other. We need to amplify our voices, because we also want solutions to our problems. And the only way we will get it is if we come together as a community and we continue to have these conversations. And we're not having the conversation because it might be the cool thing to do right now. We need to have these conversations because we want the next generation to be able to feel freely and to possibly have some chapters in their books in school to learn about this as well. We want our medical practitioners to have this as a part of their requirement in medical school. Like, we should not be an afterthought. Going through this important part in our lives should not be an afterthought. We should be able to go through it with as much information as we need, and we should be able to find the resources freely. Now, that was me on my rant. I would love to give Brooke and Beatrice not only a very big thank you for lending your Saturday morning to us, but also I want you to, any parting words. I don't want to say last words. That sounds very, any parting words that you would like to share with everyone, because I know we wanted to talk about a lot, but the time went by quite quickly.
It really did. Beatrice, I'm going to leave the last parting words, parting thoughts to you. Dwayne, thank you for creating this space to have this conversation. I think there's so much value. We do end up learning along the way, those friends who have had a similar experience or can be an advocate for us by teaching us those advocacy moments. And sometimes it's because they've lived through it and they're open to sharing it. Sometimes they've heard about it from someone else and are passing on a story. And today it was exciting for me to, listening to Beatrice and listening to yourself. I'm like, oh yes, yes, yes. And so I appreciated even just, today, having things come up that were moments that really resonated so deeply with me, and here to talk about that. There's 3 things that I wanted to share. One of them, we talked about, your family doctor. One of the things to ask, how can I advocate for myself? It is a question that they actually do have some guidance on, and they don't share that with everyone, not unintentionally, but some people aren't ready to be an advocate for themselves. They're just, they're not emotionally in the space to be able to do that. So asking outright, how can I better advocate? Is there something I haven't asked about that I should be asking, or someone that you can recommend I talk to? And so that's one of the ways. You talked about your professional circles, and for anyone who's listening to this that is in a leadership role, Dwayne, you're a manager. You described such an empathetic person who is open and willing to have that conversation and willing to have that moment of vulnerability, and that is a real gift of leadership. And so for those of you who are in a leadership position, giving some thought to what that can look like. And then the last piece is just, again, if you have more questions, let us know, because very happy to tap into our networks if we don't know the answers, and if we do, to share our experiences. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brooke. Beatrice.
Thank you to both of you for inviting me in this conversation. I'm humbled by your experience. I'm hopeful. I think that's going to be my point number one, is you're not broken. We're not broken women, but we all have challenges. And so the key is how, what are the tools available to me to help me in my own specific journey. So number one. Number two, evidence is so, please, when you do seek help, like your circle of care, the people who know your medical history, of course, but as we've said, sometimes we don't always get what we need. And so sometimes you just have to look for additional members of your team to help you in that journey. And so if you need help with that, ask a friend. Go to reputable sources like the menopause societies and the resources that we'll place in the notes. And then the third one is community, the importance of community. So there are, publications that are clearly demonstrating that social isolation in and of itself is an increased risk of mortality. So if you don't have community, and community can be 2 people, it does not need to be 100 people, but find 1 or 2 people who support you. And then look at our own communities here. We hope you join us. Duanya, Brooke, myself, I have a social media and YouTube channel that is all focused on creating community around midlife. So if you feel alone, know that you're not. Know that you are not. That's it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, ladies. And, thank you everyone for listening. And as discussed, we will have resources in the description. We will have the link to part 1 of our conversation in the description. And we will continue the conversation. So make sure that you ask questions. Make sure that you share this video with your girlfriends and sit and watch it together like you're watching a show, and have the conversation. I can share real quick one thing. A few of my girlfriends and I, we had a day out at a hotel downtown, because you can day rent some hotels and take advantage of their spa. And this was last winter. And we started talking about, just randomly while drinking, talking randomly about all these symptoms that are popping up in our lives, and had an entire conversation about menopause. And it was so refreshing to be able to just sit and talk with your girlfriends and know that we're all going through this together. And we started sharing resources. That's what our community looks like. And that's what we need to start doing. Inviting all your friends to have this conversation, because you can help each other. You can lean on each other. And, you can do like we are. We're sharing our experiences. So you all are our girlfriends, and we are your community. Full stop. So again, have a wonderful rest of your day. Make sure you remember to like this video and share it with some friends, and have some conversations, and good luck. Be your own advocate. Have a good one.